By coincidence, a friend of mine called me yesterday, said that somebody downtown gave him a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, by somebody named Suzuki. Is this book any good? He doesn't know anything about Zen. Or is this the motorcycle manufacturer's book, or what is it anyway? I say it's a real classic. It really is. So there are many beginners here today, at least first time here. Somewhere in his book, he makes the case, Suzuki Roshi makes the case that beginner's mind is Zen mind. This mind that is, what is this? So I hope we all keep that mind, even if we've been practicing for 10, 20, 30, 40, or in the case of our guiding teacher, almost 50 years. Keep that mind. What is this? As if you're first sitting down on the cushion, sitting down on the cushion for the very first time. So, beginner or not, does anyone have any question?
Microphone?
There.
I have a question. It's like a really kind of silly question maybe, but I was noticing today as I was sitting that my nose starts to itch. I'm sure that's a very common thing to happen. Mm-hmm. And I think so, what's going on there? What do you do when your nose itches?
Yeah, I recommend scratching it. Yeah. You can wait a little while. What is this? This itch. Yeah, but if it's really distracting you, something like that is okay. You don't have to be completely like a statue when you're sitting.
Because I always thought it was almost a good thing, because you only notice if your nose itches if nothing else is going on in your mind.
Yeah,
then,
absolutely.
my nose itches.
You can use this as your meditation. What is this itch? And only itch for as long as you can. That's another approach. If your legs are really bothering you and you find that you're in a wrong posture, then you really shouldn't correct your posture significantly, like you shouldn't do this. The correct form is to bow, stand behind your cushion, even if it's for only a few moments, bow again, and then sit down in the posture that you want. Pardon me? He's going to demonstrate right here. Judy's legs hurt. That's it, yeah. So that's correct form. But if you think you can squirm just a little without anyone noticing, you might try to get away with that, So thank you for your question. That's an important point, actually. Sometimes, I certainly had the experience of sitting through, periods of illness where you just don't feel, well at all. But you've decided, or you feel you have an obligation, actually, to sit. You'd be surprised what you can sit through. Yeah. That can really open your mind. So don't rule that out either. Well, thank you for your question, Jonathan. Are there any other questions?
Okay, so the little phrase, what is it? What's in the way is the way. I think how it goes. What's in the way is the way.
What is in the way is the way.
So a lot of times, how humans are like, oh, if only, I could have this job, or if only I could have this kid, or this husband, or this house, or this whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we try to set that aside, or like, oh, we'll do the thing that we really want after we get this thing. And so I found that little saying helpful a lot of times when I try to like run away from problems. It's like, okay, kind of confront, kind of like you look at a kong-an, you kind of just look at it from all angles or whatever. And I found that to be really helpful, instead of trying to like wait to deal with what's bothering you until it's a better opportunity. You know, so do you have any like Zen stories or commentary on that?
I don't have any stories, but maybe I can say something. So Ali brought up kong-an. The usual American pronunciation is koan, and that's from the Japanese, like Suzuki Roshi would say koan. We say kong-an, which means literally a public case. So a kong-an is usually a very brief story with questions appended. So we have a book, I guess it's not handy right now, 365 kong-ans for everyday life. And we use these kong-ans extensively. We have 10 basic kong-ans, actually it's expanded to 12 now. It's kind of a curriculum. It's now 13, actually. In a few moments it might be 14, I don't know. But we have a kong-an curriculum that all of our students are exposed to. And if you answer one, then you go on to another. So the question is, how do you work on a koan? And briefly, whenever it appears, really look at it. And depending on your circumstances, perhaps you can look at it for quite a while. Perhaps you don't have much time, but what is this? How can I respond to this situation? That's what most kong-ans are all about. Here's a situation. It's a difficult situation. Maybe it's a little tricky. What can you do? How can you relate to this? Maybe even how can you help other people with this difficult situation? There are many, many possibilities. So you can bring up a kong-an during your meditation practice. Yes?
Can you give an example?
So the first kong-an in our curriculum is, Buddha said all things have Buddha nature. Joju says the dog has no Buddha nature. When Joju was asked, does this dog have Buddha nature? He said, mu, which means no. So Buddha said all things have Buddha nature. Joju says the dog has no Buddha nature. Which one is correct? And often a kong-an will present you with alternatives and ask you, which one? And usually when you're presented with alternatives, you look at this one, you look at this one, and then finally you choose one. So in kong-ans, you cut right through all of that. So sometimes you have what we call a life koan, and that's what you're talking about. So a vexing question, a situation that you really don't know how to deal with. What is the best thing to do here? So how can you resolve this? So when we're sitting, we always stay with our technique. Maybe you are counting your breaths. Maybe you are asking yourself on the inhalation, what am I? On the exhalation, don't know. We have various techniques. So what I usually advise is stay with your regular practice. But when you found that you've spaced out anyway, then pick up your kong-an and just perceive the kong-an until your mind wanders away from that, as it usually will, and then you return to your regular technique for the rest of that round of sitting, so that you can pay attention to this kong-an, or to whether it's a Zen kong-an or a life kong-an, for one period of attention during meditation practice. So you might try that, and let me know. Okay? I'd like to know. Are there any other questions? Any online questions? Oh, we have a Jennifer question.
So you and Tom both were talking about Suzuki Roshi, who's part of the Soto school.
Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit, well, I was reorganizing some books recently, and I saw I had some books on insight meditation too. And so could you talk a little bit, how does like sitting practice, for instance, how does practice differ from like insight or Soto versus the quantum school, these different?
Yeah. In the quantum school, we have various techniques, as I just mentioned. Soto is known for just sitting. I've never practiced with a Soto teacher. Actually, I have. But that was a long time ago. That was Kwang Roshi in California. But I was just a guest there. Everybody else was doing their practice, and I was doing my practice. But just sitting. So this means intense focus actually on your seated posture. That's what you're paying attention to mostly. Yeah. And you notice a lot of things, as I'm sure you can imagine or have experienced, just paying attention. That in itself can be a very complete practice. Or attention to breath. So you can pay, I recommend paying attention to breath even if that's coupled with another technique. So very complete inhalation, starting with the belly, moving up to here, then holding a breath for some short period, and then a long exhalation. You can almost kind of see the exhalation. You can't really see, unless you have a real problem, the air coming out of your mouth. But you're perceiving it, this long, long exhalation. So that's just breath meditation. So kong-ans meditation, breath meditation. I don't know enough about insight meditation to say anything about it. I mean, I've read some things about it, but I don't want to misrepresent it. I've never practiced it, never talked to an insight meditation teacher. Or for that matter, read an insight meditation book. So I know nothing about it. So we have different techniques. And in conjunction with the teacher, it's a good idea to maybe explore different techniques. So try some standard technique and stay with it. But there's nothing wrong with bringing the question up with the teacher if you're having trouble with it. And maybe the teacher can tweak it a little bit, help you tweak it somewhat. It's an enduring challenge. It really is. I can only speak for myself, but I imagine I represent, say, most Zen students who have practiced, say, for 40 years or more. It's very difficult. So don't be discouraged. Very often, I find myself losing it. Notice it, just bring it back. Same old demon, or maybe a new demon every now and then. So, but it is, it's certainly a very important question. What technique to use when you're practicing. But in conjunction with the teacher, find a technique that works with you and stay with it, and don't be discouraged if your mind drifts off. Just bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. It's like a little puppy. It's going to go sniff around here and go pee over there, and just bring it back, bring it back. And then eventually maybe you'll be able to say, good dog. So we have time for one more question. Thank you for yours. There are no online questions today.
I have a question.
Okay.
On here, yeah. In the talk, Tom mentioned Suzuki, encountered this situation when his master passed away. He wanted to practice by himself, but he had the duty to take over as the head of the temple. What did he choose to do at the end? Was that the right thing to do? For me, if you practice solo, do your meditation, that's more for you. But you take over the temple, maybe that's not for you. But I don't know. Can you say something, please?
I don't know much about how Suzuki Roshi dealt with his illness. There's one story about him that I remember when he was very, very ill. He still participated in some ceremony, and I'm not sure which ceremony it was, but he walked into the Dharma hall and walked up to the altar, and he had a staff in his hand. And with every step, boom, boom, boom. So it's said that his walk from the back of the temple to the front with the staff enlightened many people. And I can believe it. That's all I know about Suzuki Roshi's death. I kind of remember it. I was already practicing. Judy, do you remember anything about Suzuki Roshi, especially when he was old and when he died? We need a microphone. There it is.
Well, he died before either of us started practicing. He died a very long time
I was
ago.
interested in practice for about
Yeah.
15 years before I started.
Oh, you were much more precocious than I was. He died of a very difficult kind of cancer,
Yeah.
and I know that he kept teaching as long as he could,
Yeah.
and he didn't have any self-pity about it. And Zen Mind Beginner's Mind was written with the assistance because his English wasn't that good. And maybe it was even translated from Japanese, I don't remember. But it was the person who helped him write it was an American student of his who herself was dying of cancer.
He was what?
Herself was dying of cancer, a very
Oh, yeah.
difficult kind
Oh,
of
really?
cancer. So it's very interesting that this really important seminal book was written by and assisted by two people who were dying of very difficult forms of cancer, and I think that's a wonderful teaching. His life was very difficult. He had had a lot of personal tragedy in it, and he was a very funny and interesting guy, and the book, his biography, is called Crooked Cucumber,
Yeah.
and I highly recommend it. It's a really wonderful book, but that's all that I know.
Thank you very much. So we began with the Suzuki Roshi and we ended with Suzuki Roshi. Homage to Suzuki Roshi.